back in April, before the NA FanFest, I did a stream predicting what I thought was going to be revealed at that FanFest. I got some things right and some things wrong, and some things I couldn't have possibly guessed because they caught the entire community off guard. You know, I'm only human. With EU FanFest literally happening tomorrow, I wanted to dip back in, take a quick retrospective at what I went over in that video before we have brand new things to talk about tomorrow. So let's get into it. The first thing we talked about for NA FanFest in my predictions was I wanted to talk about Kefka. I wanted to learn about Kefka. We didn't learn a lot at NA FanFest, but since the fight has come out, me and my static have been doing it. I'm really enjoying the fight so far. I was hoping that there was going to be Chaos and X-Death, and the fights so far are pretty much everything I was looking for, so huge W there. I was also guessing about the 24-man because we hadn't seen anything from that at that point. I really liked the 24-man. It was freaking great. 7.5 24-man was awesome. I love the whole 11 story. I think they did a really great job with it. And I even liked at the very end how they left it very amorphous in terms of what going back to 11 looks like. Because the game's still there. You could just go play it. But, you know, maybe someday we go to a shard that is Vana'diel. Who knows? I would be stoked for it. So here's hoping. I was very positive, obviously, that an expansion was going to be announced. I guessed that it was going to be ice-themed because I thought it was going to be like the Void and Garlemald, but it's like an ice shard, so I was kind of right anyways. I jokingly put Heaven's Ward 2, Heaven's Wardus. And, so far, the assets that we've seen really do give me that vibe. It does remind me of things in Heaven's Ward. I feel like I knocked that out of the park on that guess, to be honest with you, which I'm very happy for, obviously. Looks super, super sick. I'm super, super excited about it. But I didn't really make any predictions about the expansion because I didn't really think I had too much basis in terms of like lore and stuff. So I definitely was closer than I was expecting to be. So good for me, I guess. Release date, I didn't think that they would even announce a window, and we got the window entirely. I feel like, conservative in a guess of February to May, basically. And we're getting it in January, which is crazy to me, but obviously very exciting because I want the expansion. Give 8.0, please. All of those smaller guesses out of the way, my biggest predictions, I think, for 8.0 were concerning job and job design. I was very confident we were going to get a physical range DPS, but my personal hope was that we weren't actually going to get a 5th tank. I remember them at one point talking about adding new jobs being like something that they were getting to the end of. I think it was from an interview several expansions ago, and they just still keep making new jobs, so apparently it's like good enough to keep doing, which I guess makes sense for an MMO. But part of my thinking was when they were talking about, you know, there's been so much discussion about job homogenization that the idea of a 5th tank, in my mind, didn't fix any of the problems with the other 4 tanks. And that was the main concern I had with them adding a 5th tank. I also suggested them not adding the 5th tank, but making the MT-OT split, which was an idea that I had before, you know, finding out that that's what they're doing at the FanFest. So while we are getting a new tank, which was not necessarily on my preferred list of things, they are doing the MT-OT split and evolved mode, which I couldn't have possibly predicted, which I am really hoping that evolved will solve the job homogenization issues enough that there's enough design space for a 5th tank. That is my hope currently, as that was the main point of the guess that I did make. It would be cool to see tanks in a good spot this expansion, and I'm hoping that the 5th tank will play a part in that. Only time will tell. I will say, I am very pleased that I correctly picked MT-OT. I got the splits wrong. I don't think I could have guessed that none of the existing tanks besides Paladin were main tanks, but it's really cool that they're implementing that system because I think it did really do such a good job for healers. I'm really excited to see what the MT-OT split is going to look like for tanks. The next prediction that I made was some type of system change. In my mind, I was thinking more mechanically, like skill trees or talent points or any sort of permutation there. Obviously, we're getting evolved, which is not quite the same thing. But I think what they're aiming to improve is the moment-to-moment gameplay. It seems like that's the direction that they're going. I've got some reservations on it because I still feel like the gearing system is, I don't know. I hope gearing changes, but obviously we've learned more about that too. In line with adding more character customization, I was kind of hoping that the 110 jump would have been the point where they added sub jobs or like advanced jobs or something like that. They're not doing that. They're just going to 110. I totally respect it, but I was hoping for a little more spice. Again, I do kind of hope they try to do some sort of interesting progression system that's new to the game, or additional avenues for obtaining gear. Obviously, we don't know anything about what the seasonal thing is going to be, but if that affects those avenues of gear, then I'm going to feel like that's a total win, because that's what I wanted from my prediction. Yay! I get to fire off some confetti or whatever if it ends up being right. They did talk about the changing of reward cadence, the new patch cycle, seasons and such. Again, I didn't come even close to predicting, but it could be something that does, spice up the systems enough for me. I've been playing this game since A Realm Reborn, and boy howdy, there are some parts of it that I'm like, pretty sick and tired of doing. The extra raid difficulty is a great step in the right direction. I hope it's actually part of gear progression as opposed to just, as a raider, normal mode is basically like do it once for the story, and if I'm slow to clearing the second fight of the tier, then farm out the final fight with the blades or whatever, the collectible item. So I'm really hoping that the middle difficulty does offer some reason to do it, even if you're a raider. So that will be really cool to see. I'm hoping that they land somewhere in there. But it is, they didn't mention it in the thing. It's impossible to say. But like I said, I predicted it and I won it. So if it happens, happiness. The one thing I'm really hoping for is a third option for gear. It would be really cool if there was like a relic item we could progress over time to replace the tombstone, or, you can accumulate savage gear over time. I really don't know what it's gonna look like. But again, I did predict some form of gear progression change, and we didn't hear anything about that concretely from NA. So here's hoping we hear about more tomorrow, I guess 5 hours from now, as I'm recording this. The next chunk of my predictions was all about Dark Knight stuff. They didn't say anything about it, so I don't know. So fuck me, I guess. The information that we learned from seeing Paladin should extrapolate out to the other tanks, at least to a certain degree. And everything that I saw from Paladin has me excited about what could be happening with Dark Knight. I hope that we get a cool mana management, fun job gauge stuff, whatever the case may be. As long as the job is fun, I'm going to be a happy camper. And like I said, from what we've seen in Paladin, I think it's going to make for a pretty cool Dark Knight in evolved mode, but only time will tell. Overall, though, I don't think I did that bad. Evolved, I couldn't have possibly seen coming, but it's a great change, in my opinion. I think the jobs look really cool, and I'm quite excited to see how the rest pan out. And I did guess there was going to be a big change, so I guess I was right in the general sense. Well, that about does it for a post-mortem on everything I guessed. Like I said, I was right some places, wrong some places, but by and large, I'm just excited. I think Evolved mode is going to be super fun. I think Evercold looks great so far, and I can't wait to learn more about it, in 4 hours or whatever. So, in terms of my predictions for tomorrow, I don't have the slightest clue, to be honest. I really hope they show an off-tank. I hope we see a caster for sure. And I think the new job that will be revealed, I'm going to lean towards the Fizz ranged as opposed to the tank. Not a huge basis for that. They showed off Gunbreaker in the Shadowbringers teaser trailer, so part of me feels like maybe it'll be the DPS and not the tank, but that's based on nothing, more or less. So it'll be interesting to see tomorrow for sure. I am extremely excited for Evercold and the FanFest tomorrow. So I'm glad I was able to make a quick video breaking down, what I guessed, what I got wrong, etc. I hope you enjoyed watching. If there's anything that you thought, please feel free to let me know down in the comments. Here's hoping for some exciting announcements at the EU FanFest, and for Evercold to be awesome whenever it comes through. I hope your job gets exactly what you were looking for.